The stars shimmered in the vast emptiness of space as the Tyra fleet approached Earth, their massive warships cutting through the black void like predators, closing in on prey. For months they had observed humanity through their advanced sensors and surveillance satellites, and for months they had debated whether this young species was worth the effort. That Xyra had conquered countless worlds before harvesting resources from less developed civilizations in exchange for what they considered the ultimate gift to these primitive species, the so-called protection from galactic predators. Yet the humans were different. The Xyra knew they had advanced technology far beyond their capabilities for a race so young they had been watching from the safety of their orbiting stations, waiting for the right moment to strike. The time had come. Earth's rapid technological rise had sparked their interest. It was inevitable. The Xyra thought that the humans would eventually become a threat, but what they failed to grasp was that humanity wasn't just an emerging civilization, it was a force waiting to be unleashed. The first wave of Xyra warships descended toward Earth with overwhelming speed and precision, their vast fleet hovering like a dark cloud above the planet, preparing to launch an invasion of unimaginable scale. They expected resistance, but not much. The humans had yet to develop the kind of military might the Xyra were used to seem unconquered worlds. Humanity had no fleet, no army that could withstand the superior technology of the Xyra. Their guns were primitive, their ships slow and outdated, yet what they didn't understand was that Earth had something no other civilization had: an indomitable will to fight for survival. As the Xyra moved into position, their enormous warships began to release thousands of drones and drop pods designed to swarm Earth's defenses and incapacitate any resistance with brute force and laser precision. What they failed to notice was the hum of engines in the distance. Earth's forces had been watching and waiting. The humans were prepared not with the latest and most advanced technology, but with strategies forged over centuries of conflict. Human ingenuity had taught them how to survive even when they were outmatched and outgunned. The Xyra would soon learn that Earth's military had its own set of surprises. The first missile fired from Earth's defense systems was a warning shot. It soared through the atmosphere and struck the lead Xyra warship with pinpoint accuracy. The blast was not enough to destroy it, but it sent shockwaves through the alien fleet. The humans had not only detected their arrival, but had already positioned their most advanced weapons in secret, hidden deep within the planet's crust. These weapons were the result of decades of research and development, designed to counter any extraterrestrial threat. That Xyra had not anticipated this kind of foresight. As the humans launched wave after wave of missiles and drones, the Xyra fleet was forced into evasive maneuvers, their shields flickering as they struggled to adjust to the unexpected onslaught. Humanity had delivered its first message with deadly precision. They were not weak, they were not unprepared, and that Xyra were not as invincible as they had believed. The first phase of the invasion was turning into something far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. The Xyra would soon realize that their greatest enemy was not just humanity's weapons but their minds. As the first wave of Xyra forces touched down on Earth's surface, they encountered something they hadn't predicted. Chaos, yes, but of a different sort than they had expected. Humanity's response was immediate, but it wasn't one of desperation. The Earth's military, once fragmented and disjointed, had united under a single cause, drawn together by the reality of the invasion. Governments, who had spent years arguing over resources and borders, now spoke with one voice. From the dense forests of the Amazon to the sprawling deserts of the Middle East, from the icy tundras of Siberia to the dense cities of Europe, humanity was ready to fight back. The Xyra believed they would easily overwhelm the scattered defenses, but they soon learned that they were not dealing with an ordinary planet. The first battle began with the ground-shaking thud of alien pods smashing into Earth's soil. As the Xyra drones began to unload from their vessels, the sky darkened with the sound of human-made aircraft soaring through the clouds. Earth's forces had anticipated the invasion and began deploying fighters, attack helicopters, and specialized drones that were designed not for flashy tech, but for sheer effectiveness. As the Xyra advanced, they encountered a battlefield that was completely alien to them, one filled with the unknown tactics of a species that had fought wars for millennia and never truly given up. The human military commanders, having learned from decades of past conflicts, quickly recognized that the Xyra's technological superiority was meaningless without understanding the terrain they were invading. Earth's armies, each with their own battle-hardened specialists, moved into position with an eerie cohesion. But it wasn't just soldiers in tanks or aircrafts. They had something more. The Xyra began to notice the presence of local militias, civilians who had taken up arms with whatever they could find. Makeshift rifles, Molotov cocktails, and even scavenged Xyra tech. What the Xyra had expected to be a war of superior forces against inferior ones turned into a massive uprising. At first, the Xyra underestimated these ragtag fighters. They believed that if they targeted the major cities, the heart of human power, the rest of the planet would quickly fall in line. But they had no idea how unpredictable humans were. Resistance came from every corner, from urban streets to mountain ranges. Human soldiers, trained in urban warfare, fought with a fierce cunning that the Xyra had not seen before. They used the cities not as obstacles, but as advantages. Narrow streets, alleys, and tunnels were turned into traps, every corner a potential ambush. The Xyra drones, meant for precise strikes, struggled to adapt to the guerrilla tactics humans employed, and every time they thought they had secured a position, a new threat emerged from the shadows. In the skies, Earth's pilots showed no fear. A coalition of air forces from around the world had unified, and the once advanced Xyra warships now found themselves under attack from all angles. Human fighter jets, though smaller and less advanced, utilized tactics that caught the Xyra off guard, attacking in waves, creating confusion, and exploiting every weak point in the alien ships. The Xyra had expected their advanced weapons to crush any defense that came their way, but they soon found themselves being picked apart by a species that knew its terrain better than anyone else. It wasn't just the military fighting back. Ordinary civilians took up arms in defense of their homes. Farmers with shotguns, mechanics with improvised explosives, and teachers with homemade rifles fought alongside soldiers. Humanity's unity in the face of such overwhelming odds was something the Xyra had never encountered. It wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting everything they had ever known. The Xyra leadership was dumbfounded. What had been intended as a swift conquest was turning into a brutal and unpredictable war. The Xyra had thought their superior technology would make them unstoppable, but they were finding something far more difficult to deal with: human resilience. As the days turned into weeks, the Xyra command found themselves bewildered. The initial triumph they had anticipated quickly soured into a drawn-out conflict, one they had not prepared for. Every calculated advance was met with resistance, often more sophisticated and ferocious than anything they had experienced in their previous conquests. The once confident alien generals, accustomed to easy victories over less developed species, began to feel the strain of uncertainty creeping into their ranks. Reports from the front lines grew increasingly troubling. Humans were everywhere, and they were doing things no one had expected. In the war rooms aboard their massive flagship, the Xyra commanders analyzed the growing resistance with mounting frustration. Their high-tech drones and robotic soldiers were efficient, but the human forces had managed to counter them in ways that defied logic. The Xyra's superior firepower and shields had failed to provide the dominance they assumed would be enough. Earth's forces, though seemingly less advanced, had proven to be just as creative and determined as they were vicious. One of the most perplexing aspects of the human resistance was their ability to think on their feet. Time and time again, the Xyra found themselves outwitted, their strategies disrupted by the unpredictable nature of human tactics. Where other civilizations would have crumbled under the first signs of invasion, the humans had not only survived, they had adapted. It was as though their very survival depended on an almost instinctual ability to exploit weaknesses, no matter how small. When one method failed, they adapted with lightning speed, turning disadvantages into strengths in a matter of days. The Xyra watched as humanity, in the middle of chaos, crafted new weapons from their surroundings, hacking into their technology, setting traps, and even turning enemy drones against their own forces. Each success by the humans was a reminder of how deeply they underestimated their enemy. For the first time, the Xayra began to see the humans not as simple prey, but as a genuine threat. Reports came in from their scouting parties, describing human soldiers using tactics that no war manual had prepared them for. In urban areas, humans had turned their own cities into labyrinths, using dense buildings, underground passages, and high-rise vantage points to confuse and outmaneuver the Xayra forces. While the Xayra's tech was sophisticated, their understanding of terrain and urban warfare was limited. The humans, in contrast, used their home turf to its fullest advantage, knowing every street and building better than any invader possibly could. The battlefields became more dynamic. Instead of static front lines, they were fluid and ever-changing, as if the human forces were always one step ahead, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Xayra, with all their advanced weaponry, were slow to react, unable to keep up with the rapid pace at which humanity adapted to new threats. They had anticipated an easy campaign, perhaps a few well-placed battles, some overtaking of strategic cities, but now they were bogged down in a war of attrition, facing enemies who refused to follow the usual rules of engagement. Each success on Earth seemed to ignite a new wave of resistance, and the morale of the Xayra soldiers began to crack. On the ground, the alien generals called for more direct strikes, sending larger and more powerful armies to crush the humans once and for all. But what they did not know was that humanity had been preparing for this. The humans had set traps, false retreats, feints, and decoys, designed to lead the Xayra forces into kill zones. The Xayra forces, who had been conditioned to expect submission from their enemies, were falling into every one of these traps. A single coordinated counterattack would send whole units scrambling, retreating in confusion. The Xayra, now faced with a fight they could not understand, began to panic. The realization slowly dawned on them. This wasn't a simple invasion. They weren't facing a technologically inferior species. They were facing a species that could adapt, improvise, and fight in ways that Xayra had never seen. The humans' strength didn't lie in their weapons, nor their technology. It lay in their ability to learn, to grow, and to fight in the face of overwhelming odds. This was something that Xayra had never encountered before, and it was starting to dawn on them that this war might be far longer and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The Xayra fleet had expected their advanced technology and superior numbers to overwhelm Earth in a matter of days, but weeks had passed, and the tide of battle had only grown more unpredictable. The alien generals had been forced to revise their strategies again and again, yet each new tactic seemed to be met with an equal counter from humanity. While the Xayra debated their next move, the humans were busy turning the tables in a way the invaders could never have predicted. The first major blow to the Xayra came when their flagship, a colossal warship designed to rain destruction upon any civilization that stood in their way, was taken down in a daring raid. The ship had been deployed to eliminate a key human stronghold, an industrial city nestled within a mountain range. The Xayra had assumed that the humans would be easy targets in such a densely populated area. What they didn't know was that this city was home to some of Earth's most brilliant engineers and military strategists. A small force of Earth's most elite soldiers, along with a handful of cunning hackers and engineers, infiltrated the Xayra flagship using an unconventional approach. They had long studied the alien technology and found a vulnerability in the ship's power grid. Using modified human tech, they were able to bypass the alien security systems and gain access to the heart of the vessel. As the Xayra fleet continued its bombardment from orbit, unaware of what was unfolding within their ship, Earth's infiltrators set their plan into motion. Within hours, the flagship's power systems began to fail. The Xayra crew, initially unaware of the sabotage, continued to direct the fleet's attack, but soon they realized something was terribly wrong. The warship's main reactor, which was responsible for its weapons and shields, started to shut down. Desperation turned into panic as human soldiers, now deep within the ship, triggered a series of explosions that sent the flagship plummeting to the surface. In a deafening crash, the warship tore through the atmosphere and collided with the ground, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The destruction of the flagship sent ripples of confusion and fear through the Kyra ranks. The flagship was supposed to be invulnerable, its weaponry unmatched, and its presence an unshakable symbol of Kyra power. Yet, humanity had pulled off what seemed like an impossible feat, without the need for overwhelming firepower or vast resources, just sheer will, courage, and a deep understanding of their enemy. The Kyra, for the first time, began to question their assumptions about the humans. On the ground, the humans celebrated their victory, but they did not rest. They knew that Kyra would retaliate, and they were ready. The destruction of the flagship had ignited something within Earth's military and civilians alike. It was as if a fire had been lit in the hearts of every person, whether they were soldiers on the front lines or civilians working in factories and tech hubs. They saw now that the Kyra were not invincible, that their technology and strength could be challenged, and they were determined to carry the fight to the alien invaders. The Kyra, now forced to reassess their position, had no choice but to reallocate their forces, withdrawing some of their troops from other areas to focus on recovering from this devastating loss. The once unshakable confidence of the Kyra fleet was now fractured. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and innovate, and in doing so, had made a critical mistake. What had started as a swift, one-sided invasion was now a protracted and increasingly dangerous war, a war that the Kyra had no idea how to win. Humanity, fueled by the knowledge that they could stand against the invaders and emerge victorious, prepared for the next phase of the battle. The Kyra's technological superiority was no longer an automatic guarantee of success. The tide had begun to turn, and the humans now knew that they had something far more powerful than alien tech: their unity, their ingenuity, and an unshakable will to defend their home. As weeks passed since the destruction of the Kyra flagship, the humans found themselves united in ways they had never been before. In the past, divisions between nations, ideologies, and cultures had often driven them apart, but now, with their very survival at stake, the Earth's people set aside their differences. The human will to fight had ignited, and it burned brighter than the most advanced weapons the Kyra could deploy. The moment that Kyra had underestimated humanity's resolve, they had sealed their own fate. On the battlefield, the change was palpable. Human forces, now galvanized by their victory, fought with a fervor that stunned the Kyra. What had been seen as weakness, human emotion, their fierce loyalty to their homes and families, had become their greatest strength. As human soldiers, civilians, and resistance fighters rallied together, they found themselves capable of feats of coordination and endurance that the Kyra never anticipated. Every retreat was temporary, every setback was brief, and every victory was celebrated as proof of their resolve. In the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, the humans did not falter. It wasn't just the military that stood firm. Across the globe, scientists, engineers, and technicians worked tirelessly, often with no sleep, to develop new weapons, new technologies, and new tactics. The ingenuity of the human spirit was on full display. People who had spent their lives as ordinary citizens now found themselves in the midst of the greatest conflict Earth had ever known, contributing in ways they had never imagined. A scientist who once worked on renewable energy was now creating powerful EMP devices to disable Kyra technology. A teacher, who had never held a weapon, was now coordinating guerrilla warfare tactics in urban zones. It was a global effort, and it was unstoppable. The Kyra, meanwhile, were slowly beginning to realize that they were fighting something far beyond mere soldiers. Their initial belief that humanity was a species with no cohesion, no sense of unity, had been shattered. They had thought they could divide and conquer Earth easily. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that not only fought back, but grew stronger with every defeat. The psychological warfare of humans was not something that Xyra could comprehend. While alien generals expected surrender or fear, the more they pushed, the more determined humanity became. Every human life lost only fueled the fire of resistance. Families who had seen their homes destroyed, cities that had been reduced to rubble, all continued to fight with the knowledge that if they stopped, if they gave up, the invaders would erase everything they had ever known. The Xyra had never encountered a species so willing to sacrifice everything, to keep standing despite every obstacle. To the Xyra, this relentless pursuit of survival, this refusal to yield, was incomprehensible. In the field, Earth's military leaders capitalized on the growing unity. They began to coordinate global defenses with remarkable precision, and the previously scattered efforts now became a singular force. They used every possible tactic, distracting the enemy, setting up decoys, using the terrain to their advantage. Where once human forces had been overwhelmed by superior numbers, they now had a clear advantage: the element of surprise. The Xyra, accustomed to dealing with enemies who were quick to surrender or panic, were beginning to experience their first true taste of resistance. Reports came in from all fronts. Small victories were adding up. The human forces were not just holding their ground. They were pushing back. Entire regions previously dominated by Xyra forces were now liberated, and the alien invaders were forced into retreat. For the first time, the Xyra were no longer in control. The invaders, once so confident in their technological supremacy, now found themselves besieged by an enemy that had not just the will to fight, but the ability to outsmart them at every turn. In their command centers, the Xyra leaders were frantic. They had prepared for a quick victory, but now they were facing a prolonged war, one they did not know how to win. And it was the humans' refusal to give up, to stop fighting no matter the cost, that left the Xyra stunned and deeply troubled. This, they realized, was humanity's greatest weapon. It wasn't their technology or their armies. It was the unbreakable human will. The longer the war dragged on, the more the Xyra forces found themselves confused, frustrated, and increasingly terrified by the very humans they had once considered a primitive inferior species. In all their years of conquest across the galaxy, they had never encountered an enemy like this, one that not only fought back, but thrived in the face of adversity. The human ability to adapt to the impossible, to outthink their advanced technology, was beginning to break the Xyra's resolve. What was even more baffling was that this war was not simply about technology, tactics, or resources. It was about something deeper, something that the Xyra had never understood. The Xyra had come to Earth expecting to dominate through sheer force. Their ships were larger, their weapons more destructive, and their armies vast. They believed their superior firepower would bring about quick submission, and when humanity didn't fold under the first wave, they assumed the humans would be worn down and broken. But as each day passed, the Xyra began to realize that their assumptions were gravely mistaken. Humans weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for something far more profound. Humanity's unity and resilience, forged through countless centuries of hardship and struggle, had proven to be their greatest asset. The Xyra, with all their technological advancements, couldn't comprehend the strength of a species that fought not just for survival, but for their very way of life, their homes, their families, their freedom. The humans were not simply soldiers on a battlefield. They were defending their entire existence, and the Xyra had no idea how to break that bond. The Xyra leadership convened in their high-tech command chambers, where they analyzed every report coming from the front lines. They saw the same pattern emerging time and time again. When the humans were pushed back, they didn't surrender. Instead, they regrouped, found new strategies, and fought again. Even the smallest human faction, regardless of its resources, would rise to challenge them, often using nothing but their wits and their knowledge of the land. The Xyra had begun to suspect that it wasn't just military skill or tactics driving the humans. It was something far more intangible, something they could never replicate. The Xyra, for the first time, realized they were not fighting an ordinary species. They were fighting a species that could never be conquered by force alone. Every Xayra victory seemed to ignite even more determination in the humans. The civilians whose homes had been destroyed didn't cower. They rebuilt. The soldiers whose comrades had fallen didn't retreat. They advanced. The Xayra began to see something growing among the humans. A spirit, a force that no weapon could destroy. It was a force that surged within each person, no matter their rank or position, and it transcended any technological advantage that Xayra possessed. This realization struck at the heart of the Xayra strategy. Their technology, while advanced, was built for domination, not understanding. The Xayra had always prided themselves on their cold, methodical approach to conquest. No emotional attachment, no compassion, just efficiency. But they could not fathom the depth of the human spirit. While the Xayra had learned to destroy, they had never learned how to inspire. What made humans formidable was not their technology or their military prowess. It was their unwavering belief in something greater than themselves, a belief that they would protect their world, their families, and their future, no matter the cost. Across Earth, people were joining the fight. It wasn't just the soldiers anymore. Children built barricades with their parents. Artists painted murals of defiance. Farmers used their tools to sabotage alien equipment. Even the smallest act of resistance sent a message to the Xayra. Earth would not fall. It didn't matter how much the Xayra attacked. It didn't matter how much destruction they caused. Earth's human spirit was unbreakable. The Xayra found themselves at a crossroads. Every strategy, every advantage they had tried to exploit was met with the same unyielding resistance. They began to realize that they had underestimated the power of the human will. It was not just a force of nature. It was the very core of humanity. And that was something the Xayra, with all their advanced technology, could never hope to overcome. The Xayra, reeling from their growing sense of helplessness, had no choice but to escalate their tactics. What had begun as a strategic military invasion had now become a full-scale war, one that was no longer about technology or firepower. It was about a battle for hearts and minds. Despite their immense technological superiority, the Xayra had failed to crush the human spirit. Instead, they found themselves in the midst of a prolonged, brutal conflict, one that was draining their resources and morale. The psychological toll of fighting an enemy so relentlessly determined was beginning to fracture their once imposing front. Yet even as they braced themselves for an escalation of the war, the humans were planning their next move. They had already turned the tables once, with the destruction of the Xayra flagship, and now they were determined to do it again. Across the globe, resistance movements had coalesced into a unified force, pooling knowledge, resources, and firepower. What had once been disorganized cells scattered across the world were now an international coalition, a single unit working toward one goal, driving the Xayra off their homeworld. The human leadership had learned much during the war, particularly how to exploit the Xayra's weaknesses. Unlike other species that Xayra had conquered, humanity had shown an uncanny ability to find the cracks in their seemingly impenetrable armor. Now, after months of gathering intelligence, the humans knew something that Xayra didn't. That Xayra warships, despite their incredible size and strength, had a vulnerability hidden deep within their core systems. It was a flaw in the energy matrix, a fatal weakness that could be exploited. The Xayra had always counted on their technological superiority to maintain an impenetrable defense, but humanity, ever resourceful, had discovered a way to weaponize that very flaw. This discovery sparked a new wave of resolve among Earth's fighters. For the first time, they believed they could win. The knowledge that the Xayra were not invincible, that they could be beaten at their own game, spread like wildfire through the ranks of the resistance. The Xayra, for their part, were blissfully unaware of the brewing storm. Their generals, in their arrogance, continued to believe that Earth would ultimately surrender. There had to be a breaking point, they thought. But they were wrong. As the Xayra grew increasingly complacent, humanity was preparing for their most daring strike yet. Human forces, armed with the knowledge of the Xyra warship's vulnerability, began to rally for a final, decisive offensive. The mission was audacious. Surgical strikes deep within Xyra strongholds, infiltrating their most secure fleets, and striking where they thought no one could reach. Earth's engineers had adapted their weapons to pierce through Xyra shields, targeting their energy cores with ruthless precision. The final attack would be led by a coalition of the best fighters, engineers, and strategists from every nation on Earth, operating with a singular purpose: to cripple the heart of the Xyra fleet and turn the tide of the war once and for all. As the operation began, Xyra commanders, still wrapped in the comfort of their superiority, dismissed the human resistance as a last-ditch effort that would soon be snuffed out. Their warships, massive and terrifying, deployed as though the threat was nothing more than a fleeting nuisance. Yet as the human forces moved closer, it became clear that this was no longer a desperate attempt. This was a full-scale assault, coordinated and focused, with one thing in mind: victory. In the final moments before their first strike, a strange sense of fear began to creep into the Xyra commanders' minds. It was a fear they had never felt before. They had faced countless species, but none had come close to understanding their own tactics, to exploiting their weaknesses with such brutal efficiency. Humanity, with all their imperfections, had become their greatest adversary, and now, with their fleet vulnerable, the Xyra were faced with the terrifying realization that they might lose. The final assault would test the limits of both sides. That Xyra, caught off guard by the precision and coordination of the human attack, suddenly found themselves battling not just their enemies, but their own hubris. And as the first wave of human forces descended upon the heart of the Xyra fleet, the balance of power on Earth began to shift irrevocably. The final assault had begun, and the Xyra were caught off guard. What had once seemed like a guaranteed victory had now transformed into a battle for survival. The humans, unified in their resolve and armed with the knowledge of their enemy's weakness, had launched their coordinated strike with precision. They knew this was their last chance to push back the invaders, and they weren't about to waste it. As Earth's forces stormed the Xyra strongholds, their fighters and bombers cutting through the skies, humanity's greatest weapon, its ingenuity, was on full display. The Xyra, who had assumed their technology would shield them from any assault, now found their most formidable warships faltering under a barrage of human-made explosives and advanced EMPs that exploited their weaknesses. Earth's forces had learned from their previous victories, building upon their mistakes, and now the full scope of their technological creativity was unleashed. The Xyra could no longer deny it. They were being outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and outwitted at every turn. For the first time in the war, Xyra command centers buzzed with frantic activity. Reports flooded in, each one more alarming than the last. The once mighty warships were being systematically dismantled, their shields failing, their energy cores destabilizing. Earth's forces, with their unrelenting will to fight, had breached the heart of the alien fleet. Even the most advanced Xyra war machines couldn't stand against a force that was willing to sacrifice everything for victory. On the ground, the human fighters pressed forward. The Xyra had thought that their armored drones and robotic soldiers would crush any resistance, but they had underestimated the creativity and adaptability of humanity. Soldiers who had once fought with standard weapons now wielded tools of destruction forged from their own understanding of Xyra technology. Alien tech was used against them. Xyra drones that had been hijacked were turned into allies, their targeting systems used to attack their own forces. Humanity's ability to adapt to any situation, to turn the tide no matter the odds, had become their greatest weapon. In the midst of the chaos, the Xyra leaders gathered in their command ship, isolated from the ongoing battle, their thoughts growing increasingly desperate. Their own internal communications became a jumbled mess of panic. The human resistance, once dismissed as insignificant, was now on the verge of total victory. And yet, despite all their technological prowess, the Xyra could not fathom the strength of will that had driven humanity to this point. They had underestimated Earth's greatest weapon, not its technology, but its unyielding determination. As the final wave of human soldiers stormed the central hub of the Xyra flagship, they encountered their most difficult challenge yet, the alien leaders who were determined to fight to the bitter end. The Xyra had placed all their hopes on this final stronghold, and they would not go down without a fight. But even as they prepared to make a last stand, it was clear that they were already losing. Earth's forces, despite their wounds and losses, advanced relentlessly, guided by a single unshakable belief that their home, their world, was worth saving. In the heart of the Xyra flagship, Earth's best engineers and military strategists placed the final charges. They had carefully planned every moment of this mission, knowing that the end of the war depended on this last strike. With a deafening explosion, the central energy core of the flagship erupted, sending a shockwave of destruction through the alien ship. The Xyra flagship, the symbol of their overwhelming might, was obliterated in a cataclysmic blast. As the smoke and debris cleared, the remaining Xyra forces, now without leadership and direction, faltered. The final blow had been struck, and Earth had won. The Xyra, once confident in their ability to conquer any species, were forced into retreat, their once unstoppable fleet reduced to ruins. The war was over, and humanity had triumphed. The world, battered and scarred by the invasion, now stood together in triumph. Cities lay in ruins, but the spirit of humanity, stronger than ever, had proven victorious. The survivors looked to the sky, knowing that the Xyra's arrogance had been their downfall. Earth's greatest strength had not been its military power or its technology. It had been its will to survive, to protect, and to fight against the odds. The victory wasn't just a testament to human resilience. It was a declaration to the universe that humanity was a force that would never be underestimated again. The Xyra had learned the hard way. You could never conquer a species that refused to be broken.